Hello everyone, nubkeks here. Welcome back to Nub Raids. We're going to be pulling a couple of shards to kick off today's video for the Wixwell's path, which is on right now. But I also want to have a little bit of a talk in today's video, a bit of a deep dive discussion into some of the polls I've been running recently, because there's pretty interesting stuff happening, I think. For example, like this poll from today, overall, do you like the hero path events in Raid? Again, this is overall, not this specific one, overall, and it's overwhelmingly negative, actually. It's kind of surprised me. So I want to talk about some of those things, especially off of the call that we had with the developers recently. I did a video with Hell Hades, both on his channel and on mine, talking about that yesterday. You guys have really enjoyed the video so far, and we've seen great responses to it. So again, thanks for that. But yeah, I mean, one of the way that call started, to remind you guys, it started off with the Raid devs being like, hey, content creators, great to talk to you again. What do you feel about the state of the game? Now we're here chatting face to face. So how do you feel about the state of the game right now? What's working, what isn't? We genuinely want to know. So, I mean, let's dive into some of it here in today's video. Let's start off with, we'll start off though with a couple of shard pulls. For me, the Wixwell's path, I've actually been just doing some champ training. So I've actually come all the way down here and got my 2 keys and unlocked this right here. So we still need some points. I was actually thinking coming into this that when I woke up today, I had 25 sacreds. Clan boss was really good to me. I got 2 more. But like I said, I was at 25 today coming into it. And I thought, I'll probably pull 5 sacreds. Why the heck not? Fina's up. So unlikely to get her, but that would be amazing if she popped out of one shard. It's just a fun little thing to do. And I'd still have 20 sacreds in the bank if they do a guaranteed legendary, which certainly could be possible. This is something that's quite interesting. Again, going back to these polls, right? We had this also inspired by Saf from HH Gaming, did a video comparing Titan events to Heroes paths, right? And interestingly enough, I put up a poll. It's not got actually too many votes. It's a relatively small poll here. I guess a lot of people didn't vote because they don't like either one. They didn't want to support either, maybe. But quite a large preference for Titan events over Heroes paths, which is interesting, right? And then, again, you can see it makes sense. People very much dislike hero paths. I did a poll a while ago on Titan events. I think it was when the last one was on. Which I put the exact same wording, and which is overall, do you like Titan events in Raid? You can see they're still quite strongly disliked. This is from a month ago with almost 5,000 votes. Quite strongly disliked, guys. Quite strongly. So, yeah, we got a problem, perhaps an event problem in Raid. Perhaps so. But, where was I going with it? I don't remember where I was going. I've lost my train of thought now. But anyway, what I was saying, I'm going to pull a couple of shards for this, though. I was thinking about it, and yeah, actually, I'd have pulling 5 shards would be too many points. I'd be way over capping, and I'd be just grabbing some random rewards. So I'm actually just going to pull the 2 shards I got today from Clan Boss, which will get me pretty close to this 4-star soul. And yeah, because look, I can just come over, grab these other keys. So in fact, let's actually do that. Let's grab those keys. Now I've got 3 keys, so it's enough to open up this lock. So great. So, at that point, for basically 7,500 plus the 2,000 for like 2 sacreds, basically, I can get the 4-star soul. I think that's kind of a decent place to be in. The 4-star soul is not particularly useful for Wixwell, but it does mean if they come out with a higher Hydra difficulty in the future, it's still 1,000 red essence. It's still a lot, but if I really need to, I could buy a 5-star soul for Wixwell for the extra stats and whatnot. But yeah, I also kind of want to pull a couple of shards. So let's start off with a couple of shards. Let's go. Oh, no, it's an epic. Illusinia, please. It's a Jurang. All right, never really used Jurang. I'll just empower all my epics as we can. Is it? Look, no, we're not lucky. Lockwayne. Oh, well, he is he is needed for the Lady Mikage fusion, but I've already got that. Illusinia continues to avoid me. She does. That by the way, my least favorite events. Let me put that out for you guys. I'll talk about some of my preferences here today, of course. My least favorite are probably the champion training for an epic champion. It's like, we've done these before for legendaries. I don't mind the champ training events to get a legendary, but when it's champ training for an epic, I was like, are you kidding me? Like the amount of work you want people to do for an epic, that's just crazy. All right, well, that's that's my luck there for that. We'll grab the 5-star soul, open up this lock, and I'm now at basically 5,000 points. I'll do another bit of champ training, and I will grab the 4-star soul, and I think I'll be happy there. I could keep pulling, right, and try to get this 5-star, but I don't think I'm that pushed about it, right? I think I would rather have a really big stockpile of sacreds if they did a guaranteed champion. Like they added, I wasn't a big fan, honestly, of Gieth, the Truth Shield. People like her well enough. I didn't think she's particularly great, but she was added in the last patch. They also added in Blaked, who I think is way better. I don't know if he'd be a very good champion for guaranteed. He's like a quite similar to sort of a PvE Duchess, a non-arena Duchess, really. They could come up as guaranteed because we don't have that. That's where my train of thought was earlier. There usually is the Titan event kicks off after a fusion. It's not kicked off, so we may not have a Titan event. There might not be one between this fusion, the Wixwell one, and the next one. We might just have a gap with them trying different things, which is one of the things they were saying. So from the talk we had with the developers, I don't think we actually went into this too much, me and Hell Hades, in our discussion. But one of the big things they were talking about in terms of events, and I said to them, guys, I polled my community, and 2/3 of my community do not like Titan events. You know, how do you feel about events and what is happening? And basically, they said some of their big ways of looking at it. This is very important to them. Is that Raid is a live service game, so there must always be events on for people to do or to look forward to. And they said for people to log on into the game and say there's absolutely no events on at the moment, and there's nothing interesting happening in like the next few days either. For them, that's the worst possible outcome. They want there to always be things in the game that you could be doing and working on, etc. So I think that makes a lot of sense. It's a pretty straightforward thing to aim for. Logical. It's more the question of, you know, could they be doing better in terms of achieving that goal? But that is, I think, pretty straightforward, the goal they're looking to achieve. Another goal they were talking about was that they want there to be choice between events. So an example they gave, I think, was, oh, well, for instance, during the Fusion, we often run a Sand Devil tournament during the Fusion. This is an extra tournament. It's not part of the Fusion. And the idea is, well, look, at least there's some sort of events for people that are not doing the Fusion, right? I think a good example, they haven't done it in a good while, but some events they tried before were like faction specific. So again, randomly during a fusion, it might be like, oh, you have to do Spiders Den. It's a Spiders tournament, but you can only use champions from the corrupted factions. That's it, right? It would be stuff like that. Again, it's very optional. It's aside from the fusion. So if you got lots of resources, you could do it as well. If you're skipping the fusion, it's like, oh, okay, cool. Well, at least there's something I can do. And that's somewhat of a goal for them as well. I actually do think it's interesting we haven't had any of those faction-specific tournaments in quite a while. It's really been Sand Devil tournaments been pretty common. There's not even been, I don't think there's any Phantom Shogun tournaments, are there? Am I wrong? I think we've got Sand Devil tournaments quite often, but I don't recall there ever being a Phantom. Maybe I'm wrong. Let me know. Am I right or wrong? I don't think there's ever been one. But like right now, like 3x Lifesteal and Dragon is terrible for me, but you know, it's there as an optional event. And I think this is a good concept as well of, yeah, creating choice between events. I think that makes a lot of sense that, you know, not every event, you know, you won't do every event, but that there would be interesting choices. Again, the question comes up though, is that being achieved? Are there actual interesting choices? And that brings me on to my point. So this was, these are some of the polls I've run so far. So for the Fusions poll, let me actually try find the Fusions poll. I worded that one slightly differently because I wasn't really intending to compare all of these. It's just sort of happening now. This was 2 weeks ago. I was just curious, right? Which is, what is your current take on Fusion so far in 2024? So 9% love them, 32% like them. So, you know, I summarized that. 41% like them, or like are positive. 34%, the biggest chunk, are neutral. And 16% dislike and 9% hate. So like 25% of people just really quite negative about fusions. A third of people are neutral, and then actually slightly more than a third, again, like 41% actually like them. It's interesting. So maybe I should have put, it would be interesting to see a neutral option, I suppose, for hero path events, right? There's no neutral option here, but I don't know. Maybe it's a reflection on us as a society, global society, being too negative. I think you could certainly make that argument overall, for sure. I don't know. Need more Buddhists in the room. Um, so I mean, I wonder what the breakdown would be of neutral. But still, when you give, I think it's interesting. It's still telling when you give people a choice between, again, just not like, do you love them? It's just overall, in general, like, do you like them? It's most people, when given the choice, are really going no. They're going negative. So this was what we had. So the fusions were the most popular at 41%, saying that they actually like them. Again, a big chunk were neutral, but we'll leave that aside, seeing as there weren't neutral options in here and the others. Again, maybe other channels could run polls. That could be really interesting. For Titan events, they were the next most popular, but only 34% like them. So again, like the dislike is pretty bad, right? Titan events, 34% like them. You could maybe, say divide by 4, multiply by 3 for this, and divide by 4, multiply by 2. So you could extrapolate and say that this might turn out to be, what's that? It's about 8 fours, 9 fours, 8.5, and then by 3. So maybe 25% might be neutral towards Titan events. Maybe, but that's an extrapolation. I don't know if that's true. Anyway, with Hero Path events, like 22% like them, which is pretty shocking. Deck of Fate, I've not done a poll on that. I probably will do a poll when we have a next Deck of Fate. My assumption, I've put it at the bottom because that would have been my assumption, is that the Deck of Fate would be the least popular event. That I think that people really don't like them. So it's an interesting thing overall. In terms of what are my opinions on these, again, I would say the if I was to actually answer my own polls here and give you my thoughts, for me, I'd have clicked the I like fusions one. I don't love them. I love the fusion champions. I think it's great thing, but for me, I personally think fusions are a good idea, but they're too hard. I think the point requirements are too high, and I see fusions, and again, this is not how raid devs see it, or maybe how you see it. The way I see fusions are that they should be a fairly accessible thing for just play the game fairly actively, semi-actively even, for the month, and this is sort of your reward. That they're not that challenging. It's just cool new champion for you to play with. That requires a bit of work, but not too much. I think it requires a bit too much, like Dungeon Divers in particular. We'll talk about that. But I would click, again, I'd say I like fusions overall. I like it. It's stuff to do in the game. You got to plan around it a little bit. But I think they're too hard for me to love them. If I was then to answer, did I do the other one first? Let's go on. Yeah, let's find it. Overall, do I like Titan events in Raid? I would have said overall, yes. But again, I wouldn't be absolutely loving them. And overall, do I like Heroes Paths? I would have said yes. Funny enough, I probably would actually prefer the Hero. I do think I prefer Heroes Paths to Titan events overall, actually, interestingly. But yeah, let's talk about it some more. So that's sort of my feelings on all of them. Deck of Fate, I actually like quite a lot. Funny enough, again, this comes to a preference thing as well. Probably my favorite Deck of Fate events are even the ones with gear. And I know I say it's funny because I think most of you hate them, right? They are probably the events I see get them the most negative comments are Deck of Fate events, which give gear as a reward. Whereas for me personally, I really enjoy them because I think the rewards are really good. But most of you disagree. Now that brings us to, this is an interesting thing in terms of somewhat personal preferences as well. I said, let's do an analogy of an ice cream shop, right? If you walk, so it's not a perfect analogy, but it's an interesting thought experiment. If you walk into an ice cream shop, like how many of the flavors should the shop aim for a typical person to like, right? Because again, or few people will like every single flavor. Like, is it okay if someone walks in and they go, oh, well, I actually don't like most of these ice cream flavors. Like, so long as there's, like, would one flavor that's good be enough? That, okay, well, I don't know, there's chocolate ice cream. I can get chocolate. Great. Is one choice enough? Do you need a few choices? Like, what's the ratio? That's good. I'm sure there's actual studies on this, in terms of, yeah, in terms of business studies and stuff, and what actually works well, what is the right amount of choice. There's probably actual empirical data. I just don't know what it is. But I think it's an interesting question. Like, should an ice cream shop have it be that a typical person walking in would like 60% or 70% of the flavors? So they're not going to like everything. How many should they actually like? How much choice is good? It's interesting. And then again, you apply that to raid, and this is where, applying the analogy maybe works or doesn't. What should it be with raid events? Like, what is a good level of like to dislike ratio? Do we want nearly every event type that actually is recurring, that's common, to be mostly liked? If that's the case, we're in trouble. Again, the mostly liked event, not even half of the people like it, right? So that's a bit of a problem if that's the case. Now, is it okay for it to be this way? Or like, is 22% too low? Is 41%? Like, where do we go? So I thought that was interesting, right? Because again, the ice cream shop thing, I think it's good to point out where it sort of makes it more clear that there is certainly an element of personal preference that's not right or wrong. It is just personal. That not everyone is going to like everything. Not everyone is going to dislike everything, but it's what is the right balance, right? One event type we definitely need to talk about is dungeon divers. That's one that really comes up that people specifically call out with fusions in particular. So when I was asking you guys about fusions, this is the most hated event. I think for good reason. It's the most disliked. The most frequently cited thing for sure is that there are extremely high point requirements for dungeon divers. I think that's a problem. Like, if you come in and try to do dungeon divers, let's say there's a dragon tournament on at the same time. If you max out the dragon tournament, you're probably only like halfway on dungeon divers, and you're going, oh, I need to grind a bunch more dungeons. I would add on to this. I put question marks because this is me speculating. It's not from your comments. But I would say dungeon is probably just boring as well. That and tying into that, the dungeon gear drops are unrewarding. That, let's say you do your dragon tournament and you're halfway through dungeon divers. You're not like, yes, oh, great. Well, that's not so bad. I'm only halfway, but gosh darn it, I'm having a fantastic time doing dungeon divers. This is exciting stuff. This is riveting. I think it really is just boring. It's just a long, slow grind, and there's very few points of excitement throughout the dungeon diver stuff. Hades, when I was chatting to Hades, he was mentioning something that I've been thinking, which is that I think a part of it is just where the game has gone. The gear sets from dungeons just aren't that interesting anymore, because you get so many other sources of power. Like when I start looking at, let's say, Fire Knight, back in the day, this was the dungeon to grind because the regen was just insane for your support champions, and stun was great. Savage was the damage set. Shield was great. Immunity was huge for arena. But like, these sets of crit damage was a great 2-piece set. I mean, this stuff has all been really power crept. Like Savage, now we've got Lethal, now we've got Merciless. For regen, well, for your supports, now you've got, Bolster set is really good, which is a paid set, but you've got Stone Skin, you've got Protection, Supersonic as well. Crit damage has been replaced by all these flexible sets, really, yeah. Immunity was hardcore replaced by, number one, there's a Doom Tower set, which is Untouchable maybe, and then Stone Skin to completely replaced it. Shield set by Bolster. Like, Fire Knight really fell off. Like, I remember, I love Scratch's, when you look at Scratch's like year raid recap stuff, and you could see how hard like he was grinding dungeons back when he started. Like, he talked about that back in like year 1 or 2. He was going crazy, like wailing out so hard on the dungeons, but it's not something he does anymore because, the rewards just aren't there. So that's definitely a problem with dungeon divers, right? Sand Devil, Phantom Shogun, even Iron Twins have a good bit of payoff, and you need to do Minotaur, if you're not buying the masteries with gems. Minotaur is better. So there's good rewards for doing this stuff, but the regular dungeons, the dungeon divers, right, getting gear, it's pretty unrewarding. Yeah, so Hades was exactly agreeing with me. I think he might even be planning some sort of video diving into that in more depth. But I think that it's a bit of a problem as well. So I think, for example, with dungeon divers, which would help fusions be more liked in general, definitely toning down the points in the first place would be good. I don't think it's a bad idea in general to force people to do through events the different dungeons, right? Just so you get a variety of the gear. But I think that it does become bad to force people to do it when the gear isn't that good. So I think that's definitely something they could look at, honestly, that could make this a lot better. Not only lowering the points, even if you lower the points, I think it's still boring and it's still unrewarding, Dungeon Divers. It's just something you have to do for a fusion or Titan event, whatever. It's never something that you want to do or you're excited for, and that sucks. Like, Ice Golem is definitely the best one at the moment because Reflex is good and Curse, even Provoke is decent to have for Hydra. But still, a lot of it's junk. Like, they could absolutely come in and for the next few stages, they could say, okay, you know what? Or like stages 11 plus, maybe we'll just, it doesn't drop life, offense, defense, crit rate, even resistance anymore. Maybe it only drops retaliation, reflex, curse, and provoke. And heck, I don't know. Maybe we throw in Slayer in there, right? We put one of the Forge Pass sets in there as well. So it's no longer just a pay to win thing. Maybe make that a bit of a rarer drop so you're still incentivized for the Forge Pass. But yeah, give it a bit of excitement. Like, oh, cool, I got a really good, I don't know, I got a really good bolster drop from, let's say, from Fire Knight. Fire Knight drops bolster now. It's very rare, but you can occasionally get a piece, and that's kind of exciting. That could be nice, you know, just somewhat mixing up the gear to make it a bit more exciting. I think it'd be good. Spiders, I didn't mention, it's got a similar problem where, yeah, these things are still good, but now we've got all these 9-piece flex sets, right, that give you extra benefits that are just sort of replacing this for your best gear. It's not as exciting. Or you've got reaction pieces. There's just so much gear power creep from so many other sources. There's not much motivation for Dungeon Divers. So that's like one example of a specific event, a simple event, but I think an event that used to be better way back in the day because it was lower points, the gear was more exciting, so Dungeon Divers wasn't that big of a deal. When I started playing, it wasn't really a huge deal. It was fine. But nowadays, I think it absolutely sucks. And the comments are saying why, and the comments are saying they hate it, and I think these are a few of the reasons why. Then another idea I wanted to touch on, this is the final sort of broad idea for this video. It's an interesting question, isn't it? With events, and this idea of creating choice as well, it's difficult to create different satisfying stopping points to events, right? Satisfying stopping points. So for instance, this is a reason I actually like Heroes Paths, but apparently I'm, like I said, I'm very much in the minority here, But like with this Heroes Path, one thing I like about it is, you know, I could have just with some champ training come in and grab the 3-star soul and go, okay, that's a significant reward. And I'm obviously doing that, skipping the vast majority of the path. But to me, that's still like a pretty satisfying stopping point. It's like, okay, I understand I could grind champ training way more or pull a bunch of shards to get extra stuff. But I feel like that's a satisfying stopping point. For me, as you guys have broken down, I'm actually going to go grab the 4-star soul, which has cost me a couple of shards and a bit more champ training than maybe I would have wanted. But I'm like, okay, I've put that in. I get a 4-star soul. It's a satisfying point. Or if you go the whole way in for this, you know, grab the 5-star soul, you're probably pretty satisfied going, got the 5-star soul, I'm done. There might be tons of other stuff in here that you haven't gotten, but you're probably not too upset that you haven't got like these bits over here. It's not tearing you apart, probably. Maybe it is, maybe. So I actually think that, funny enough, I would have said before that this was really important, having different satisfying stopping points. For example, in the fusion, right, probably the only satisfying stopping point in a fusion is doing the whole fusion. There's not really any variety. Why is variety important? Well, it's because there's such a wide range of players in this game, from new players to old players, from free-to-play to spenders, from casual players to hardcore. That's 3 different axes of investment and capability to go further in these events. So that's why it could be quite good to have, I think, multiple satisfying stopping points. But then again, I look at these things and people really like fusions, which, I mean, maybe as an early game player, you might be like, oh, I'll grab the epic from the fusion and I'm good. So maybe that's a satisfying stopping point. But for the most part, it's just you do it or you don't. These ones, again, Zek of Fate, you can flip as many cards as you want or don't want. There's no reward for, well, sometimes there is a reward for flipping them all for like a guaranteed champion or something. But oftentimes it's like you can just flip as many cards as you want. But people, I think, would probably, I'll do a proper poll. I think people quite hate the event though. In Hero Path events where you've got lots of choice, actually, real choice, is very unpopular. Titan events, Oftentimes you've got those milestones. So maybe you can stop at a 3-star soul. You can stop at milestone 3 or milestone 4. And those I think do somewhat succeed at being satisfying stopping points. But I would say the hero's path is maybe, I don't know, maybe it's similar. With the Titan events, it's often I have to commit to it. It's quite like a fusion. It's like I commit to it from the start or I don't. I feel like it's still quite binary. But then again, people quite, well, I was going to say people quite like it. It's still not very popular though, is it? And maybe that's still a problem with the fusions, that there's not too many. Well, I don't know. I would have thought that creating different satisfying stopping points was quite important. But I feel like maybe at Deck of Fate, there's no satisfying stopping point, really. I think that maybe that's a problem. It only feels good if you flip everything. And maybe that doesn't feel good enough. I don't know. But like Heroes Paths, I think, have probably the most satisfying stopping points and flexibility. But they're, again, so maybe this isn't true. Maybe it's not true at all. Interesting ideas and interesting problems. Let me know what you think, though. In fact, here's a question for you. Are there any events that you do actually like? You know, like here we go. We've got all this stuff. So far, fusions are the most popular at 41%. Are there any events like what is the most liked event in Raid? Do we think? Is there anything that would get over a 50% like ratio? Like what do people actually enjoy? And maybe I'll take the most voted for thing. I'll put up a poll and we'll see what it gets. I'm curious. Can we find what the most liked events are? And then we could try to work out then, you know, what we would want to see. Because I think that's valuable feedback to give as well, right? It's not just, well, we don't really like this stuff much, but can we find something to say like, yes, this is what we want from it? I think we can give, I think it's easy enough actually to give the negative feedback, which is also valuable, which I think Dungeon Divers is a clear example. People do not like Dungeon Divers. The main reason, the point requirements are too high. I've given some other reasons. Quite easy actually to give reasons why you don't like something. Harder to give reasons why you like something. Both are valuable though. So here we go. We've given some valuable feedback here. Hopefully that can inform things. Something actually I didn't write down, but it's worth mentioning. When I asked them, like, hey, Titan events, people don't really like them. Again, what do the devs say? They don't really mind, actually, that we say we don't like them. Basically, they said, look, we're constantly experimenting. You know, it's a live game. We put events in, and we see how they do. So I think I asked them before about Torment, right? Remember, they did a Titan event for Torment, which is basically a rerun of a fusion. I actually did a poll on fusion reruns as well. Where was that one? To see what people would like about that. Yeah. Do you think rerun fusions are a good idea? Actually, people seem quite popular about that. 73% of people are saying yes, they would like rerun fusions, and somewhat, you know, regular ones are the most popular. Then being very rare events is also in there, but like they're saying, like that's an experiment, right? We tried a Titan event, giving an old fusion with Torment. It's an experiment. We just want to see how it does. And same thing, these Titan events recently, it's an experiment. Every event really is an experiment, and they see how it does and they try to adjust it. I don't know. Again, clearly we've got an event problem still in the game where they are quite unpopular. For me personally, like I said, I'm more positive about the events than most people are. But then again, compared to you, to probably most players, I think compared to you from the polls I've run, I'm sort of in the middle in terms of how long I've been playing the game for. Like I'm now at around the 3-year mark, so I'm almost bang on actually in the middle for how long I've been playing, I think, compared to most of my viewers. It seems like I'm fairly in the middle for time spent playing. But I think in terms of how hardcore versus casual, I'm probably much more on the hardcore end. And then in terms of how much I spend on the game, probably somewhat in the middle as well. I think I did a poll on that somewhere too, in terms of how much people spend. I won't scroll too far for this. And it's no, that's not quite it. Hang on, let me pause. I thought I did this. Oh yeah, here we go. So in terms of how you describe yourself, so I could probably somewhat low spend, but arguably mid. Let's say for the sake of argument mid, which is, I don't know. So I'd be somewhere low to mid, but actually a big chunk of, so I'd be a bit further on as well. So I sort of bang on the middle for me in terms of how long I play the game for that axis. I'd be higher than average for spend. And I'd be also, I think, higher than average for sure on hardcore. I'd say probably in that order. So mid for how long I've been playing, then I think a bit further on for sure in terms of spending, and then probably in like actual time investment, per day in the game and thought and all of that. Not really surprising on these as a content creator. That would be the one where I'd be probably most ahead of people in general, and that definitely shapes my view of events. But that's sort of where I'm at. I definitely think, though, again, to finish it off, I think when you compare it to the events we had when I started playing, which was just fusions, and that was it. It was just like fusion, and it's the same sort of things every day. I actually do find that the hero path, the deck of fate, they're just sort of new wrappers, really. They're new wrappers on the same things you're always doing, right? Like the hero path event, for example, this one is champion training and summoning shards, right? It's the same stuff we've always been doing. The events don't tend to be that interesting. Probably the most gameplay interesting ones are the ones where it's like, oh, do spiders den with like only dark elves or something. Like that's actually got some gameplay, but they're very rare nowadays. I guess they were not very popular, would be my guess why they stopped doing them. People must just not have participated much, and they're like, well, it's not much point. But like the gameplay is still fairly limited, but I think it's been improved on from what it was before, where it just be sort of random events out in the middle of nowhere. I think that they've improved the events, but there's clearly a lot of work that needs to be done. Let me know what you think down below. I am actually very curious to read your thoughts on this one. And like I said, you know, the developers, they seem to be watching this sort of stuff. This is the sort of info that they very much want, which is good. So, yeah, I certainly wouldn't expect that they're going to respond or implement all of our feedback. That would be crazy, but they are listening, and yeah, let your voice be heard. So, guys, thank you for watching. I'll see you all next time. Goodbye.